Hello, universe. Welcome back to another episode of A Lost Plot, the movie podcast by storytellers for storytellers so we can tell better stories ourselves. I'm your host, as always, Maverick, and today we have back with us our co-host, Avalon. Avalon, thanks for coming.
Hello, hola, konnichiwa, and leho.
Now, today we are coming back with a recent release. This one is, as you saw in the title, The Fall Guy, a 2024 American action comedy film written by Drew Pearce and directed by David Leitch. It is starring Ryan Gosling as Colt Seavers, the Hollywood stunt performer, Emily Blunt as Judy Moreno, the ex-girlfriend of Colt and the first-time director in the story of this film. Then we also have on Aaron Taylor Johnson as Tom Ryder, who's the famous actor in the stunt movie, and of course Winston Duke as Dan Tucker, the stunt coordinator. So there's others as well, but we're trying to get back into the plot, which is what this podcast, is all about. So, Avalon, what is Fall Guy about?
So, Fall Guy is about a stuntman named Colt Sievers, who used to be really big in the industry, but then after an accident happened on set, he withdrew from his line of work and kind of became a valet. He gets called back for odd reasons to his former girlfriend, who is a cameraman, but now she's a director. So he gets called to be a stunt double for the guy he used to be a stunt double for this movie. But when he gets there, he finds out that the actor is missing, and they want him to go find him. So, and that more or less jumpstarts the plot of the movie, and yeah, trying to fulfill his ex-girlfriend's wishes, who he still loves, while also trying to find this actor who's gone missing.
Yeah. Yep, that's a pretty good summary of this story. It's I saw a lot of advertisements for it. It's interesting because I asked other people and they hadn't at all. So I'm not sure if I just got targeted by the algorithm or if it actually had a lot of advertising going into it before the movie actually came out. I guess we'll see by how the box office performs over this weekend. Because we watched it as it came out, and we're reviewing it. So here we are today. Anyways, based on the 9-point system we always use to rate these movies, which is to generally get people in the mindset of these storytelling techniques, generally based off of a beat sheet for you who are writers, so you can see how a great story is both written and then played out on the big screen. That's what we use as the metrics for this system. Avalon, what did you give Fall Guy?
I gave it a 4.75. That's what my rating totaled.
Nice. So, a little about middle of the road. If that was, if you could say there was a mid-range, that would be right in the mid-range there. So that's pretty solid. For me, it got a 6.45.
Oh, okay.
So it got a decently high rating. I will say some of that does depend on what we think is core to the plot. So could change. That could change.
Yes, yeah.
But we're gonna discuss that today. So, anyways, let's start off with the main character. Right, we have this character of Colt Seavers. He starts off the story being this stunt double for this character Tom Ryder, or this actor Tom Ryder, and then at the beginning of the movie he gets hurt, and then he develops his character from there, that he runs away more or less from his career. What were your thoughts about this main character, and especially how they present him in the story?
I liked him. I gave he was because as his character develops, like, it's not clear at first why he stops doing. Well, I mean, it's kind of clear, but then, like, as he starts to unpack, like, his emotions and, like, what happened, like, why he left the industry for so long and why he, like, cut everyone out of his life. It's just like which is kind of a mystery at the beginning, but then it, like, develops his character, and then you begin to see why, and then, like, as he begins to overcome that, and, well, So I mean, it wasn't perfect, the character arc, but I did appreciate the character development and what they put into the character. So
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. When you say that it wasn't perfect, what exactly are you thinking comes to mind for him?
well, I don't know. There were a few scenes that maybe felt rushed, or maybe I don't know, maybe just like forced into it. But I
Hmm.
don't know. Like it was just personal. It just felt like there's. And I can't really pinpoint like a necessarily a scene. There's just a few scenes that felt like they played a little weird. Though that may have also been because this movie is also kind of a comedy. So it's like there
Right.
are some scenes that are clearly there for comedic effect, and you know what's going on, but it's like it's played for laughs. So
Hmm. Yeah, this was definitely a movie that had that comedic bent. I would say that it's primarily the other arcs that are the goal of the story, right? Some movies such as Dungeons and Dragons are primarily a comedic movie, whereas this one has a strong comedy bent, but I would say it's primarily more about the other arcs that are going on in this story.
mhm.
Yeah, I think I would agree with the idea of Colt being I think he was a decently compelling character. I really enjoyed him. I thought he
Mhm.
was funny and charismatic, but at the same time, he has this tough guy attitude, right? This guy who wants to be cool in
Mhm.
some ways, and he doesn't want to admit failure. He doesn't want to show weakness, and this is this typical macho charisma type guy you see walking around the streets, and when he has this big failure of getting hurt, it really gets to him, and he can't admit that he made this mistake, and so or that he has this weakness, and so rather than facing those problems, he runs away from them, and that becomes the impetus for the rest of the story, really. And it's very. I think it was pretty solid because it's so grounded in the reality of how people do act, even though we know, hey, we should be honest about who we are and what we're dealing with and our weaknesses. He can't. We don't really want to do that. It's in some ways shameful to show weakness, right? And so rather than admitting that and showing that to the people around him and saying, "Hey, I need help in this time," he tries to show that he can take it. And in when he really can't, he just walks away. So, um, I really liked him as they presented him at the beginning, and I was surprised how quickly they showed a very natural progression and understandable progression from someone who is got it all together to someone who has a lot of problems, right? And
Mhm.
it didn't feel forced. It didn't feel like I didn't feel like it lacked in regards to especially the opener. I thought that they
Mhm.
set it off really strongly and they really established a very compelling character who was both funny and charismatic, but also had serious issues to deal with right off the bat. So
Mhm.
I liked his character a lot, and maybe that's one of the big things about this that compelled me.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that that plays into the side characters too, because the side characters are integral to how he interacts with the world, right? Clearly, he's the reason he comes back is because of his ex-girlfriend, and he has a very strong relationship with his friend Dan Tucker, etc. What did you think about these other side characters? Did you think that they were compelling in their own right?
Yes. No, they were all very well developed. And maybe there's a few times towards the beginning I thought characters were acting a little strange, but
Hmm.
then it's like there was a reason why they were acting strange later on. It's like, oh, okay, there was actually like yes, as the mystery, like certain things come to light, and it's like, oh, okay,
Hmm.
like then it fits, and it's like, okay, they're actually acting and consistently with who they are as characters. It's like,
Yeah, and when you're thinking of that, are you thinking of so? I was thinking of Jody. I'm thinking of Dan. I'm thinking of Gail to a certain degree. I'm thinking of I forget
mm-hmm.
what the girl's name is who had the phone. Who she's kind of an ally, I suppose.
What's her
Um,
name?
I don't
Uh,
recall, but yeah, she's in the car chase scene, which is a whole bit. But
mm-hmm.
you were you thinking of when you're thinking of these side characters? I what I appreciated about them anyways was that they had clear friendly motivations with Colt. They wanted to see their friend succeed. but at the same time, they also had their own motivations for being there, right?
Yeah.
Jodie's the director. She wants to see her passion perform well on the screen, right? And she wants to make a good movie. You have characters such as, I forget the girl's name, but she wants to succeed as well, and she sees Colt as tied to the director, which could then get her a leg up in the film industry in some way, right? And so she's trying to force that connection to get a benefit and things like that, where it's like, okay, yeah, you're an ally, right, in this story, but at the same time, you're trying to do it for your own gain. So there was a couple things like that I thought, okay, you set this in the right tone. You're putting this in the right direction. These characters definitely have organic relationships that are the way they should be. And I think you see that most clearly with Jodie and with Colt's characters, right? Because Colt is the ex-boyfriend of Jodie, and Jodie doesn't really want to see him, but she's kind of going back to that old love and the passion that they had before, but she feels hurt, and that relationship is really pulling her back, saying, is he going to dump me again and just throw me by the wayside, or is this a legitimate care that we see coming from this character? And that's a big question for her and for him throughout this story. So I think that the motivations were very strong for both the main character and the side characters. Yeah. I don't know if you agree, but that's kind of where my thought process was.
I see that. And actually, I think the movie itself that she's making, some of it is clearly like unintentionally like based off of her relationship with Colt. Like, and there was like several funny moments where it's like they're discussing the script and it's clear they're discussing the movie, but they're also indirectly talking about themselves and their relationship. So it's like, and that's quite clear in the movie.
Yeah.
So
the scene where he's constantly getting thrown against the rock.
Yes.
And she's asking, what would the alien do for the human?
Yeah.
And how would they respond to each other? And it's clearly it's a allegory for their relationship and how should it turn out, right? And she's doing it in front of everyone. And he's like, are we really doing this right now? Why are we having this conversation on set, recording in front of everyone? What's going on? It's a great scene. But yeah, there's a lot of scenes like that where they really drive it home.
Yeah.
Nice. What were your thoughts on the villain or obstacle in this story?
I'd say the villain is compelling. I mean, because you're not completely sure who the villain is the first part of the movie, because you just have a missing actor, more or less. You don't know what's going on, why he's disappeared, what's happening. So the fact that Colt Seavers gets sent to go look for him, he goes to his hotel room, he doesn't find anything at first, but then he goes into finds the bathtub full of ice and the dead body, and then he begins to realize something way worse just happened here than what I was initially told. And of course, because he was seen coming out of the room, that gets him involved in the whole situation. And so now it's like he's trying to clear his name and find the actual murderer.
So this, I think, is where the movie really somewhat depends on your interpretation. There's two very strong plot lines that go throughout the story. One is the plot line around Tom Ryder and Colt Sievers finding the actor that he stunt doubles for and figuring out that whole situation. The other plot line is his relationship with Jodie Moreno and whether or not they'll get back together, right? Which of those is the A plot, the primary plot, and which of those is the B plot, the subplot?
Well, clearly the relationship is the driving motive, at least. Where it's like, because let's face it, if he didn't have this relationship with Jodie, he would not be there. Like when he's initially called at the beginning of the movie to take this role on, he flat out rejects it several times before he's told this is Jodie's first movie, and like her first director's debut, and only then does he change his mind and like, okay, then I'll come down and help if she wants me on. And he's also under the impression she wants him there, which he then finds out she doesn't know he's coming and doesn't know he's there until he's already there on set.
Yeah.
And then, of course, and then at that point, he still wants to help her and help her achieve her dream of making this movie. So, I mean, I guess in a way, it kind of is it's the driving plot, I guess. Like, the romance, like, the relationship between Jodie and Colt is clearly the driving force of the movie. Like, because he would, but, so, like, this whole mystery, like, the death, like, this other plot line is probably secondary to the relationship.
Yeah, I and that's where I come at it with this story, is I think that this movie is primarily, even though it's called an action comedy, at the end of the day, I actually think this movie is a romance movie. That it's all about Colt's relationship with this girl and whether or not they'll get back together and overcoming the obstacles between them. And it is because, like you said, all of the stakes are actually tied around his relationship with her and whether or not they'll get back together and they will be a success, right? And him.
Well, that's where all the, like, if you're gonna talk about stakes and like loss or anything like that, that's where all the stakes and loss happens. It's in the relationship. As far as the other plot line, he gets hurt, he gets chased down, but it's not like he loses anything or anything.
Yeah,
but
well, and it's like in every single action that he takes to some degree or another is tied to the relationship in that plot about finding Tom Ryder, right? He's doing it primarily not because he gives a crap about Tom Ryder, this guy that he's stunt doubled for. He doesn't care. He's doing it because he thinks that if he brings Tom Ryder back, it will make his ex successful in her movie. And that's what he wants, is he wants to make her successful by doing something that is potentially dangerous to himself to make sure that it's a success. Yeah, I think that because it's all revolved around the romance, that has to be the primary plot. Even when there's these action scenes, right, where the car is driving down the street with the dump truck and he's fighting this guy in the middle of a like back of a dumpster truck.
Yeah,
it looks like it's an action scene, but everything about it, even reflected in her doing her karaoke song while he's fighting this guy, demonstrates the stakes of the relationship, not the stakes of him getting hurt, right? And you see that the real suffering there is not that he gets punched in the face. The real suffering is that he is not at the bar with her like he promised he would be. And she feels abandoned after he promised that he had turned a new leaf and had become a better man, right? And granted, as the audience, he's doing this because he's trying to help her and support her in her dreams. But she doesn't know that because he's in the middle of a fight, right? And she's in the middle of singing a song. So they do a lot of scenes like that that show that even the action that's in this movie is supporting the relationship itself, and that's the primary goal. I think if you flip it and you say that this movie is primarily an action movie that is about the fighting that's going on and him finding Tom Ryder and saving him, right? Then, or saving the movie, then this movie becomes a lot worse, frankly.
Yeah.
I think rating that I would give it would be several pegs lower, just because frankly, I don't think the B plot is that compelling.
Well, it's not even compelling to Colt in a way, where it's like he doesn't actually care all that much about this movie, only cares about it as far as like it involves Jodie. So like if you downgrade the relationship, make it about that, you would have had to show that he cared about the movie more than what he actually did, or cared more about finding Tom Ryder. But yeah, he doesn't really care all that much, because he even calls Tom Ryder like a douchebag or something at some point. Like right.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so and we'll get more into why I think there's problems with the B plot, which is part of the problem this didn't get a higher rating from me, but I do think that it's important to note that. Did you think that there were themes in this movie?
This might be the one area of the movie where I think it might be lacking a little bit. Not that there weren't any, but I don't know if it was that strong. Like, I mean, clearly the relationship matters, but I couldn't really pinpoint, like, I mean, there is, like, this whole theme of him, like, tackling, like, his past hurt, where it's like he's afraid to stunt double after the accident. Because it's like, and more or less the idea that's conveyed in the movie is that he was a stunt double and he was riding high, and it's like he gets hurt and he's reminded of his human frailty, where it's like he's not invincible. He could get hurt and die doing this line of work, and that scares him on a fundamental level, where he suddenly realizes, wait, I could die doing this. And even though he's faced this many times before, the accident more or less makes him realize he's getting older, and there may be, like, does he actually want to die? Or does, like, how far is he willing to push himself to in this line of work?
Right.
Which that sounds like a common theme for stunt doubles in the industry. Like, I don't know many stunt doubles, but sure. I mean, it's easily understandable from an audience perspective. Well, if you see his line of work, you see where he's coming from. It's like, okay, that actually matches up. That makes sense. So it's, so, like, I guess you could say that, but I don't know. Like, maybe it's because of these two, like, the relationship is so important, and then you have this other plot line where it's like, and maybe the secondary plot line, because he is a stunt double, he's doing all these, like, crazy stuff throughout the movie. It undermines this, like, fear of coming back to stunt double work, because he's constantly doing all this stuff throughout the movie. It's almost like, I don't know, maybe that undermines the fear, like, that struggle with fear, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. I think I see where you're coming at with that. I do think that there are themes. My thought process is more along the lines of honesty, right? What does it mean to be honest with the people around you, with the people that you care about? And once again, it comes from this relationship with Jodie, because I think that's the primary plot, right? And okay. I would agree that to a certain sense, he's not developed as much as he should be in that, right? Or maybe the words I'm looking for is it's pretty simplistic in regards to the honesty arc. And maybe, well, I don't know. Maybe. Because I think it's a very explored topic, especially if you're dealing with a relationship movie. So maybe that's where I'm coming from. But it does get nuanced, right? Later on in the story, as we get to, well, we'll get to the climax. But I'm just going to, spoiler alert, throw it out there now, is that you have this discussion with Jodie near what I would argue is the climax, and he says more or less he couldn't deal with being honest with himself, and so he couldn't be honest with her. And that's I think that's a nuanced view, that honesty starts with being honest with yourself before you can be honest with other people. Because if you think that you're macho and you can take it all on and do everything, then you're going to act like that. And if you can't, and that doesn't reconcile with who you are as a person, that you think you can take on everything and you actually can't, and reality hits you in the face with that, what do? You're now incongruent with yourself. You say you can do one thing when reality says you can't. And instead of facing that and changing his worldview and saying, I was wrong, I actually can't do everything, he runs away from his problems. And he doesn't really reconcile this disparagement in his mind. And that causes further problems, because he loses this relationship with this girl he loves. He loses the career that he had. You know, everything kind of goes to the wayside because he can't reconcile with himself. And so, yeah, I think that honesty as a theme is pretty strong. It didn't get full points for me, I will say that. But I did think that it deserved high marks just because of the types of discussions they had through it.
Okay.
But feel free to push back.
No, I actually didn't. I didn't think in terms of honesty for some reason. I just like saw the whole fear arc, and I didn't. I don't know why I didn't even think honesty for some reason. I just saw his fear like presented several times in the movie, and maybe I just latched onto that mentally. I didn't actually think. So, and as you said, there's like 2 plots going in this movie. So, and maybe I got caught up in the whole like stunt part of the movie. And another thing about this movie that should be stated is that this is a movie about stuntmen. This is like a movie celebrating the line and work of stunt doubles in the Hollywood industry.
Yeah.
So it's like, and let's face it, like you don't see a lot of movies about them. You don't see a lot of movies specifically about portraying the life of a stunt double or someone who's like, because like there are the like shadows in all the movies you watch. Like they're not the actual actor doing this dangerous stuff. It's somebody dressed as the actor doing the dangerous stuff to make it look cool and look good.
Yeah.
So at least for the most part. So the movie is like such a heavy emphasis on this line of work and on these like this profession. Like it's easy to get caught up in that secondary plot line of like with all the dangerous stuff going on and like trying to find the actor and he's like getting caught in all these absurd dangerous situations.
Yeah, and the situations are fun. The movie is very fun in regards to movies. There's a lot of enjoyable scenes. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a good story, though. So you have to always draw that back and say, okay, was it compelling in its own right? And, Dungeons and Dragons had very enjoyable scenes. I thought the story was trash. Other people did not, right? So, and we've had that discussion in the past. If you want to look at that, just look at the archive and you'll find it. It's pretty long, and that was when we were still figuring out how long to make these podcasts, so in some ways I apologize. Anyways, did the story consistently put the hero in a worse situation, right? That idea of heightened tension, taking something bad and turning it worse. Did they do that well in this story? What did you think?
I'd say yes, because like as the movie progresses, like Colt is indirectly he's being directly manipulated, though he doesn't know it. And it's like the whole idea where he's brought to this movie set where he thinks he's there to be a stunt double at first, and then he's like, we need you to find Tom Ryder. Like he's gone missing. So then he goes on this hunt, like throughout, I don't know what Australian city this is. It's only implied that it's in Australia.
It's in Sydney, yeah.
Sydney, yeah. But he's like going all over the place. Yeah, that's obvious, Sydney. He,
they have the like Sydney House Opera in the background.
Yeah, no, I
for
just
people who are. No, it's fine. It's fine.
But he's doing on this hunt, and he's like getting involved. Like he finds this dead body, and it's only as the plot progresses that he begins to realize he's being set up. Where it's like someone is like intentionally framing him for this murder, like putting him in all the right places to get the evidence they need to. Because spoilers, Tom Ryder is the one who killed the other guy. He's hiding from everyone until like Colt Seavers can be conveniently portrayed as the murderer. And so it's like he gets manipulated to this point. By the time he realizes he's being manipulated, most of it's already been done. And so like before he knows it, he's frontline like news where it's like everyone's assuming he's the murderer. And then he's like, and then he fakes his death. And then there's like the whole, like, he's like trying to find a way to clear his name because he's now technically an outlaw.
Yeah. I would somewhat agree. And this is where I definitely see what you're saying. And they do, and maybe I took points away at the wrong section of the review. So this could be incorrect on my part, but specifically when we're talking about making it good to worse, and once again, you are thinking about this from the conflict of the Tom Ryder plot, right? And I've been thinking about this primarily from the love interest plot, and I think that those are very different takeaways from what makes this story compelling. And for me, I thought that the romance part, like I mentioned earlier, was pretty compelling. They start off, they have this clearly very sparks flying contentious relationship, right? And they start out, they were flirtatious and fun in the very first scene, and then everything blew apart, and then they come back together, and she hates him, but she also kind of loves him, and there's this past relationship that she's trying to reconcile, and he's right on board, right? But then as the story progresses, it's clear that they're not just going to get back together like he wants. It's clear that she has serious reservations about who he is, and is he this person that just violates trust off the bat. And the more that the movie goes on, I think the more that they develop that. Like I said, with that bar scene where they're doing karaoke and he promises to be there and then he isn't there, and that violates that trust further rather than reconciling things the way they should. And so they did very well, I think, at raising that tension, especially because it's very emotional stakes. It's not like his life's on the line in that plot line. It's that his emotional life, quote unquote, is on the line because his relationship with his girl he loves might not work out. So I thought that was pretty well, and they continued to develop it rather than having it be a stock, oh, he loves her, oh, she takes him back, or she doesn't like him, or whatever. I thought there was actually some nuance there, and I appreciated that, which is not as easy to have nuance in a romance story, I would generally argue. But I could be, I don't know. We don't normally do romance stuff on this movie's podcast, so, take or leave whatever you want from this review, from my perspective. Yeah, we're going to talk about the B plot now, which is I think this is where it falls apart a little bit for me. I think it does in some ways raise the stakes, right? Because you see the dead body. You see that he's getting framed. You see that his life is now actually on the line as people are trying to kill him, right? Colt Seavers is not in a pretty situation. My problem with the B plot is it feels so stock at certain points that it just is unbelievable. And that's where I get off the boat in regards to the B plot, is because, for example, the idea that there is a video footage of Colt Sievers walking out of the hotel room where the dead body is and saying, oh, this is clear evidence that he's the one who did this crime, right? You go, okay, sure, but there also needs to be some sort of evidence of either a body bag or something else being brought into that room, or some other situation that incriminates specifically this guy and shows him appearing or not appearing in this room at some point. You also need a whole situation where a ton of ice is brought into the hotel room to put this guy on ice and keep the body preserved until Colt Sievers can be framed. So there was several scenes where you go, okay, if there's video footage of him being there also needs to be video footage of these other situations occurring to some degree or another. That's the less obvious one. I think the more obvious stock stuff is when Tom Ryder reveals himself as the bad guy and goes, oh, I was bad all along. Gail is my friend. I'm here to basically frame you, and I'm going to kill you as soon as you reveal what's going on. So there was several scenes like that I went, okay, this is just, it felt like a plot for the sake of a plot. And I think in some ways, this is where it went more comedic than action, in that the intent of all of these very stock scenes was to be very stock. I think Tom Ryder's character in this movie, his only purpose is to be the stereotypical stock character that you would think of when you watch these movies. And that's intentional from the director's perspective. I think that it makes it funny. I think his character adds a lot in the humor department. I don't think it adds to the storyline and makes the storyline compelling at all. And in my mind, that's okay, right? Because I don't think that his arc is what this movie's about. That being said, it has a very long denouement. But it's not what this story is about. And so you could say, oh, they should have done this better, should have done that better. I think they could have made the story more compelling as a story if they had made Tom Ryder's character more nuanced, if he hadn't been so stock, if he hadn't been, oh, I'm here to kill you and clear my name and I did this bad thing and I need someone to take the blame for me because I can't deal with this right now.
Yeah, it's like,
There's this whole situation and it's funny, but it's
mhm,
not compelling. So
mhm.
that's my thoughts on that. I don't know how you react to that or what your thoughts
I
are,
would
but
say, I mean, I agree with some of that, definitely. I would only say that what I took points away from this was not in the tension department. I took this away from the setting
okay.
because I agree, like, but I think that's a world problem, not a story problem. Where it's like there are some illogical, there's some inconsistencies with the world. There are things
Mhm.
that worldview, like if you talk about the world building, this
Mhm.
setting, it doesn't make sense. If you just pick, like, you start asking questions about that, it does, like, it falls apart. And I was like, okay, like, I agree, but I didn't think it was a problem with the tension. I think it was a problem with the setting. So,
Uh-huh. Yeah, and that might be accurate. Maybe I would take a few points, like maybe give this a slightly higher ranking and take points off of setting because I actually
mm,
don't think I did. So that might help level out it just
mm,
a bit, but
so,
that's a fair point.
mhm.
I also just frankly,
But you're right. It is a lot of the, like, the sub B plot is very stock, and there were several times during the movie where it's like I got the impression, like, I've seen this kind of story beat before. I've seen this before. This character, this thing. So,
mhm,
like, the only thing that made it any different was, one, the humor. Like, some of the comedic moments are like, okay, this is legitimately funny. So
yeah,
there was, like, several scenes like that. Like, okay, if it wasn't for the humor, this scene would fall flat. Um, but yeah, I definitely agree with, like, it is very stock. Like,
mhm,
it's, if it is focused on the plot B, the Tom Rider arc, I'm just gonna call it,
mhm, yeah,
then this movie is way worse than what we're giving it credit for.
yeah, exactly, and that's why I give it grace because I think this movie's solid. Obviously, I gave it a 6.4 right off the
Mm,
bat. Probably will get just slightly lower after our discussion so far, but it's a solid rating. I'd watch it again. I think it's funny. I think it's
mm-hmm,
compelling enough that it's interesting.
mm-hmm.
I like the
It's
the
also one of
romance
those
plot.
movies that the stunt scenes are fun, and
Yeah.
so it's just like, if you like watching that kind of stuff, it's just fun to watch those scenes, especially considering that this is a stunt movie made by stunt people. So almost every single stunt shot you see in this movie was a legitimate, real shot, something they actually did and
Hmm.
filmed. It wasn't like VFX or whatever. They actually set something up and did it.
Yeah. It also was a big, even though I'm not a stunt double, I'm not in the film industry, but as a
Mhm,
cinephile, there was a lot of jokes that for someone who loves film, I really appreciated. And I think
mhm,
that that was intentional too. A lot of those just quirky nods, a lot of those fun references and all that stuff. Even from I just love that the setting of the movie was like a mix between Dune 2 and Mad Max Furiosa, right? It's like I thought that was so
the
clever
movie
of
Metal
them.
Storm.
Yeah, that they
Yeah.
that they dropped this movie right between those two coming out. And I was like, this is brilliant. These guys are
Mm,
doing so good. Um there
mhm,
were so many things in regards to just how they portrayed this film that I really appreciate. And we'll get to one in a second that I don't know if this was intentional or not. My thought is it was, but I could be wrong. But we'll
mhm,
get to that in just a second. Did you obviously Tom Rider was the big revelation. We just talked about how that's not super compelling. I think it's
mhm,
pretty obvious to see that the
I mean, the only thing about that revelation I'll say is that it isn't necessarily obvious. Like, it's not like, oh, you
sure.
sure? Like, his a dead body shows up. You don't necessarily know Tom Ryder's the culprit. Like, he's the one who
Yeah.
did it. You just see a dead body. It may be that, and they imply these things with drugs and drug money and other thing.
Mhm.
So it's like, you think maybe he got involved in some shady business and
Mhm.
someone got hurt, and now he's hiding from some, like, criminal elements because he's trying to hide things out. So the movie does kind
Right.
of throw you a bone to try to distract you. And
Mhm.
I think it does a decent job of distracting you, because I didn't necessarily think that Tom Ryder was the one who killed the body, like, killed that
True.
guy. I just, like, I was just trying to figure out what happened and like why is he hiding. And
Right.
so when it shows up that he's hiding, it's like, oh, like why? It's like, okay, it made sense. And then it kind of felt stock after the fact, but it was also like it wasn't like obvious. Like you could see it coming.
Right. Yeah, that is true. I don't recall predicting it.
Mm-hmm.
It did feel very stock when I watched it, but that could be because everything that falls out of that is a bunch of stock lines with Tom Ryder's very stereotypical bad guy type monologues. So,
like you're a privileged actor who's like thinks so highly of himself and is like he wants everyone to know that he's the best thing ever, and
right, and this expectation that he would.
But he's also insecure, and it's like, oh, I
yeah, no, I'd agree.
I can't deal with this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. When he's in the okay, I can't even think of it right now. The bathtub crying. Oh, I can't deal with this guy dying right now. It's not good for my mental health. Yeah, there was a couple things like that. Pretty good. What did you think about the ending? Right,
surprise ending. I mean, not really, unless you count Jason Momoa showing up as a surprise ending.
Yeah,
but
yeah. In regards to a climax, and this is where I would say, I would argue that the climax is actually where a lot of people would put this moment of despair where he goes, well, it would either be where he's about to crash the boat into the tanks of gasoline and blow it up, or it would be where he talks to Jodie in her
trailer.
In her trailer, that's the word I'm looking for. Thank you. Yes, where he reconciles with her and says, hey, I love you. I made these mistakes. I wasn't honest with you. I wasn't honest with myself. And that was wrong. That was not fair to you. That was not fair to anyone. And I'm sorry. And I still love you. Right. That scene is where, at that point, whether he dies or not that it doesn't matter, but in some ways it doesn't matter because he's come to terms with himself and he's been honest with her like he needed to do this entire time. And so he's done the right thing that he needed to do. And granted, it was a life or death situation that pushed him to that, which is where the B plot did connect with the A plot well. But it was the important scene, and that comes to a head there. And then everything else after that is pretty much just wrapping up the loose ends. Does she finish the story she's been trying to tell, right? Do the bad guys get caught for trying to frame Colt for killing this man that he didn't actually kill, right? All of these things are a afterflow of that. So after that confession, you're pretty confident, or I'm pretty confident as a viewer, that they're going to get out of this alive, right? That they're going to catch the bad guys. It's just a question of what's it going to play out as. So it was a pretty long ending scene because they take a while to capture them and they tell you exactly how they're going to do it. So it's not exactly a surprise or super interesting, but it is fun. It's a fun scene, but it's not like a gripping scene, I would say. Now I will say one thing they did, and this is a very small thing, and I'm not sure if this is intentional or not, but in the movie, the spoiler alert if you haven't watched it, Gail is the bad girl. Tom Ryder, as you heard earlier, is a bad guy. They end up getting the actor, Tom Ryder, to confess that he killed the man they found on ice, his other stunt double that they were trying to frame Colt for. In that ending scene, they're getting away with that recording that they just got of Tom Ryder saying that he killed him, right? And Gail needs that so she doesn't go to jail. So they're in a helicopter. They're trying to take off. There's a lot of turbulence in the situation because of all the explosions that are going off. Makes it hard for the helicopter to take off. And Colt Seavers does this cool scene where he jumps off of the camera dolly. And yeah, the camera arm, and jumps onto the helicopter. Now, what was interesting about the scene where Colt jumps from the arm onto the helicopter was not that he made it, was that everything around that situation in my mind told me he wasn't going to make it. And here's why. And I don't know if this was intentional or not, but I thought it was very clever. It is all in the commercials that played for this movie before the movie came out. Because that scene plays in the commercials. But what they show is him jumping, and then immediately after, or soon after in the commercial anyways, they show him falling toward the ground. Which does happen in that scene, but it happens later in the scene after he's gotten everything he needs. And so that, in my mind, made me think, oh, he's going to fall. And of course, after they show that in the commercial, they show a black and white version of him falling into the A to make the word fall guy, right? So I thought, and I don't know if this was intentional or not, but the idea is that they played out this scene to make it look like in the commercials that he actually falls, so that when you actually watch the movie, you think he's going to fall. Almost like the seeding of this idea in your mind that something might occur that doesn't actually occur. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I thought it was a very clever way to try to seed an idea in the audience's mind that it's going to be worse than it actually is. Now, there's no payoff, so maybe you could say that that's not effective, but I thought it was clever. I thought in regards to a marketing technique to play into expectations before the movies even started, it was done well.
Okay. I don't remember this very well, but I'll take your word for it. 'Cause
yeah, I could be wrong, and that's okay. I'm not going to die on that hill. I just thought that struck me as I was watching the movie, and I went, "Wow, that's I haven't seen that happen before, but that's a clever move." Yeah. Anyways, don't want to dwell too much on that as a climax, because as I said, you expect them to succeed to some degree or another. What did you think about the character of Colt, though? Right, he goes through this whole thing. He makes this confession of love to Jodie. And at the end of the day, is he a better man?
I'd say he's definitely improved as a person because of the experience. So it's like he comes back to being a stunt double, but like, and everything has happened, he's now more honest. He's now like more, I guess, in a way, he's more vulnerable, where it's like he's more willing to open up about who he is and what's actually going on. It's not just the tough guy attitude anymore. And also, it's just like he does this, like, so it's like the fear and the dishonesty is no longer there. It's like he's like, so he has improved as a person, and in a way, also, like, because the movie starts with the opening shots, the relationship between Jodie and Colt is strong because it's like before the accident, and then the accident happens, and then we'll cut to 18 months later or whatever, and then things are bad. So it's like, in a way, we're shown that their relationship is stronger now because of this whole ordeal they went through. So,
yeah, I'd agree. I think that it definitely was a very, partially because a lot of the conflict in this movie is about Colt's internal struggle of being honest with himself and who he is. So the very idea of him transforming is fundamental to how this story plays out. And I thought that they did that pretty well. I was very satisfied with that part of the movie. Did you think that the message was strong as well? I know you had some reservations early on in this discussion. Do you still have those? Are those where are you saying on that?
I think I've changed a little bit on those, at least, because I mean, I definitely, as I said, I got a little bit caught up in the whole like fear and the like subplots, maybe, and also like this is like all the stunts going on, like eye candies, like distraction. So I mean, I would, if it's about honesty, that changes some things a little bit, and also I could see that a little bit better. So I'd probably say it's a little stronger than what I had initially given it. So,
yeah. Yeah, and I'm just trying to think from my own perspective, how would I do it differently, right? Especially because this is for storytellers. If we were to tell our story any differently, how would you tell it? Is there anything that comes to mind that you would say, oh, if I were to redo this, I would change this or I would change that?
now about the movie,
Yeah.
I would probably like make the plot. Well, for one thing, I would give the villain a little bit more like nuance, like give him a little bit more character development. Like I don't know, maybe do more flashbacks or something with the character and Colt to show their relationship a little bit more, or like somehow intertwine, like, or like somehow like show more of Tom Ryder in the movie and show us a little bit more about his character aside from what we've already seen, so we get a fuller picture of who he was, and then maybe tie the relationship a little bit more to that subplot, because like they could have like directly threatened Jodie at some points in the movie. They could have used her against Colt if they wanted to. Like that could have happened, but that never does. So there is an aspect where like they could have intertwined the plots a little bit more, and maybe like, and that would make the movie a little bit more strong thematically, especially about honesty and like the stakes and everything going on, and the tension. And there'll probably be other things I'd change, but that's the first things that come to mind as far as changes. So.
Well, that's it. That's a good point, and I think it's interesting to even consider Tom Ryder, perhaps with, and this doesn't have to be a romantic relationship, but maybe a relationship of some degree. How does he relate to Jodie Moreno's character, or Jodie Moreno as a character, excuse me, and what does that look like, right? Because he's the main actor in the movie. She's the director now. Clearly, he's worked with her in the past.
I actually know something I would change. I just realized this is something I would change for the movie. I would have made Tom Ryder have an infatuation with Jodie at the very beginning of the movie. And the reason I would have done that is because when it's revealed that he messed with the rigging that day so that Colt Seavers got hurt, so like he's responsible for the accident, it gives a little bit more, not only does it make more sense, it just shows Tom Ryder's like arrogance in a certain way. Because like he's shown to be this arrogant person, and he gets whatever he wants. So in a way, if we had shown that he actually liked Jodie Moreno, like he wanted her to like him, but she liked Colt Sievers, his stunt double, that would have been like a humiliating thing in a certain way, where it's like his shadow, his like the guy who's supposed to represent him on screen is clearly the better guy in her eyes. That would have just added more like antagon, like from his perspective, it would have made more sense. It was like, if he's this narcissistic person, it would have just really like been humiliating on a certain level, and it would have given more credence to his like actions to hurt Colt Seavers. It would have added more stakes to the movie too, because it's like, okay, he likes Jodie too, and he doesn't like Colt Sievers because Colt Sievers and her had this relationship for a time.
Because if you just have it like it is in the movie, where Tom Ryder decides to just cut Colt Sievers down a couple pegs just for the sake of it, because he thinks he's getting too hot in his britches, then it doesn't really have any emotional stakes or any emotional payoff in any way. You just go, oh, that's a fun fact. He actually sabotaged him. But it doesn't play into... It doesn't even really play into Colt's mindset at all, really, other than, oh, I actually wasn't responsible for my own pain that I experienced. And so what? Because he's already come to terms to some degree with who he is. It really, whether he did it or not doesn't matter. What matters is that he's honest with Jodie. So the accident was kind of meaningless. But yeah, if it was related to Colt as a character and his relationship with Jodie, that could have been very interesting.
Yeah. And on top of that, if we're talking about the themes of honesty, because then in that case, you'd have both Tom Ryder and Colt Sievers being dishonest. And then it would have been more like, who's going to be the honest one? And when Colt becomes honest, you'd show Tom Ryder still being dishonest or whatever. You would have just showed, like, it would have been added more depth to that whole story arc and those themes and emotions.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's actually a great takeaway. But did this movie leave you satisfied overall? What were your thoughts on this movie?
Well, from a story, I'd say it did, only because, well, for one, if you are a cinephile like us, it is a movie about the behind the scenes of the movie industry. It's like a story that takes place behind the camera. I mean, sure, it's a movie about about a story that's happening while a movie is being made. So there's a lot of stuff going on there that's just fun for people like us.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it's like all the stunts, like despite being over the top and excessive, like it's fun to watch. It's kind of like Pirates of the Caribbean, where it's like some of these scenes, like it's over the top absurd, but it's just fun to watch. Like it doesn't make any sense, but it's funny, and it's fun to watch a bank get pulled through the streets for no reason other than it to be a hilarious scene. But yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, I was satisfied because I had fun. Does this movie have a lot of meaning and impact? Not really, unfortunately, at the end of the day. So, like, it's a good first-time watch. I'd rewatch it, but will this movie stick around in public consciousness? I don't know. Probably not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is a adventurous romp around the Hollywood scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoyed it a lot. I'd be willing to watch it again. Is it gonna stick around in the cultural zeitgeist? Probably not, and that's okay. It's a solid, enjoyable thing in my mind, right? And that's where I leave it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the pod.
Mm-hmm.
We're done. We hope you all enjoyed. We will be back, as we always are, next week. And we will, of course, we're going to see you then.